19. The Costa Sol Complex. White silence. As we drove along the coast road, a mile to the west of Estrella de Mar, the outer lying villas of the Residencia Costa Sol began to appear through the Aleppo pines that ran down to the deserted beach. The houses and apartments were set at various levels, forming a cascade of patios, terraces, and swimming pools. I had visited the retirement pueblos at Calahonda and Torrenuevo, but the Costa Sol complex was far larger than any others along the coast. Yet not a single resident was visible. No windows turned to catch the sun, and the entire development might have been empty, waiting for its first tenants to arrive and collect their keys. Crawford pointed to the crenellated wall. "Look at it, Charles. It's a fortified medieval city. This is Goldfinger's defensible space raised to an almost planetary intensity. Security guards, telesurveillance, no entrance except through the main gates. The whole complex closed to outsiders. It's a grim thought, but you're looking at the future." "Do the people here ever leave? They must go down to the beach." "No, that's the eerie thing about it all. The sea's only 200 yards away, but none of the villas looks out onto the beach. Space is totally internalized." Crawford turned off the coast road and freewheeled towards the entrance. Landscaped gardens the size of a small municipal park lay outside the Moorish gates and guardhouse. Flower beds filled with cannas surrounded an ornamental fountain reached by graveled walks untouched by human feet since the day they were laid. Under an illuminated sign announcing the Residencia Costa Sol, investment, freedom, security, was a road map of the entire complex, a ways of winding avenues and cul-de-sac that emerged from their fastnesses to join the almost imperial boulevards radiating from the center of the development. "The map isn't really for visitors." Crawford stopped outside the guardhouse and saluted the security man watching us from his window. "It's there to help the residents find their way home. Sometimes they make the mistake of leaving the place for an hour or two. They must go shopping. It's only a mile from Estrella de Mar. But few of them ever visit the town. They might as well be on an atoll in the Maldives or in the San Fernando Valley." Crawford drove up to the security barrier. From his breast pocket, he took out a smart card embossed with the Costa Sol logo and fed it into the security scanner. To the guard, he said, "We'll be here for an hour. We work for Mrs. Shand. Mr. Prentice is your new entertainments officer." "Elizabeth Shand," I repeated as the barrier fell behind us and we entered the complex. "Don't tell me the place is one of hers. By the way, who am I supposed to be entertaining and how?" "Relax, Charles. I wanted to impress the security guard. The thought of being entertained always strikes terror into people. Betty buys and sells property everywhere. In fact, she's thinking of moving into here. A few of the villas are still unsold, along with empty retail units in the shopping mall. If someone could bring the place to life, there's a fortune to be made. The people here are well off." "I can see." I pointed to the cars parked in the driveways. "More Mercs and BMWs per square foot than in Dusseldorf or Bel Air. Who designed it all?" "The main developers were a Dutch-German consortium with a Swiss consultancy handling the human systems side." Crawford slapped my knee, laughing cheerfully. "You've got the jargon, Charles. I know you're going to be happy here." "Heaven forbid. Happiness looks as if it might infringe the local bylaws." We cruised down the north-south boulevard that ran towards the hub of the complex, a dual carriageway lined with tall palms whose parasols shaded the deserted pathways. Sprinklers turned their rainbows through the scented air, irrigating the crisply mown grass of the central reservation. Set back within their walled gardens was a line of large villas, deep awnings over their balconies. Only the surveillance cameras moved to follow us. The dusty elephant hide of the palm trunks flickered with the reflected light of the swimming pools, but there were no sounds of children playing or of anyone disturbing the almost immaculate calm. "So many pools," I commented, "and no one swimming." "They're Zen surfaces, Charles. Breaking them is bad luck. These were the first houses here, built about 5 years ago. The final plots were filled last week. It may not look it, but the Residencia Costa Sol is popular." "Mostly British?" "With a few Dutch and French, much the same mix as Estrella de Mar. But this is a different world. Estrella de Mar was built in the 70s. Open access, street festivals, tourists welcome. The Residencia Costa Sol is pure 1990s. Security rules. Everything is designed around an obsession with crime." I take it there isn't any? None. Absolutely nothing. An illicit thought never disturbs the peace. No tourists, no backpackers or trinket sellers, and few visitors. The people here have learned that it's a big help to dispense with friends. Be honest, friends can be a problem. Gates and front doors need to be unlocked, alarm systems disconnected, and someone else is breathing your air. Besides, they bring in uneasy memories of the outside world. The Residencia Costa Sol isn't unique. You see these fortified enclaves all over the planet. There are developments like this gearing up along the coast from Calahonda to Marbella and beyond. A car overtook us, and the woman driver turned off the boulevard into a tree-lined avenue of slightly smaller villas. Watching her, I realized that I had seen my first resident. And what do the people here do all day or all night? They do nothing. That's what the Residencia Costa Sol was designed for. But where are they? We've only seen one car so far. They're here, Charles. They're here. Lying on their sun loungers and waiting for Paula Hamilton to arrive with a new prescription. When you think of the Costa Sol complex, think of the Sleeping Beauty. We left the boulevard and entered one of the dozens of residential avenues. Handsome villas stood behind their wrought iron gates, terraces reaching to the swimming pools, blue kidneys of undisturbed water. 3-story apartment houses were briefly visible beyond their drives, where groups of cars waited in the sun, so many dozing metal ruminants. Everywhere, satellite dishes cupped the sky like begging bowls. There must be hundreds of the dishes, I commented. At least they haven't given up television. They're listening to the sun, Charles, waiting for a new kind of light. The road climbed the shoulder of a landscaped hill. We passed an estate of terraced houses and entered the central plaza of the complex. Car parks surrounded a shopping mall lined with stores and restaurants, and I pointed with surprise to the first pedestrians we had seen, unloading their supermarket trolleys through the tail doors of their vehicles. To the south of the plaza lay a marina filled with yachts and powerboats, moored together like a mothballed fleet. An access canal led to the open sea, passing below a cantilever bridge that carried the coast road. A handsome clubhouse presided over the marina and its boatyard, but its terrace was deserted. Awnings flared over the empty tables. The nearby sports club was equally unpopular, its tennis courts dusty in the sun, the swimming pool drained and forgotten. A supermarket stood inside the entrance to the shopping mall next to a beauty salon with shuttered doors and windows. Crawford parked near a sports equipment store filled with exercycles and weightlifting contraptions, computerized heart monitors and respiration counters, arranged in a welcoming if steely tableau. Clink, clank, think, I murmured. Looks like a family group of robot visitors. Or a user-friendly torture chamber. Crawford stepped from the car. Let's stroll, Charles. You need to feel the place at first hand. He fixed his aviator glasses over his eyes and glanced around the car park, counting the surveillance cameras as if calculating the best getaway route. The silence of the Residencia Costa Sol already seemed to dull his reflexes, and he began to practice his forehand and cross-court drives, feet springing as he waited to return an imaginary service. Over here, if I'm right, there are signs of life. He beckoned to me towards the liquor store next to the supermarket, where a dozen customers hovered in the air-conditioned aisles, and the Spanish checkout girls sat at their tills like marooned queens. The wall-to-ceiling display of wines, spirits, and liqueurs was almost cathedral in its vastness, and a primitive cortical life seemed to flicker as the residents and their wives fitfully scanned the prices and vintages. The Residencia Costa Sol's cultural heart, Crawford informed me. At least they still have the energy to drink. The elbow reflex must be the last to go. He stared at the silent aisles, working out his challenge to this eventless world. We left the liquor store and paused by a Thai restaurant whose empty tables receded through a shadow world of flock wallpaper and gilded elephants. Next to it was an untenanted retail unit, a concrete vault like an abandoned segment of space-time. Crawford stepped through the litter of cigarette packets and lottery tickets and read a faded notice announcing an over-50s dance at the Costa Sol Social Center. Without waiting for me, he walked through the unit and set off across the car park to the terraced villas that line the western side of the plaza. Gravel gardens stocked with cactus plants and pallid succulents led to the shaded terraces, where the beach furniture waited like the armatures of the human beings who would occupy them that evening. Charles, be discreet, but look in there. You can see what we're up against. Shielding my eyes from the sunlight, I gazed into one of the darkened lounges. A three-dimensional replica of a painting by Edward Hopper was visible below the awning. The residents, two middle-aged men and a woman in her 30s, sat in the silent room, their faces lit by the trembling glow of a television screen. No expression touched their eyes, as if the dim shadows on the Hessian walls around them had long become a satisfactory substitute for thought. "They're watching TV with the sound turned down," I told Crawford as we strolled along the terrace, past similar groups isolated in their capsules. "What happened to them? They're like a race from some dark planet who find the light here too strong to bear." "They're refugees from time, Charles. Look around you. There are no clocks anywhere, and almost no one wears a wristwatch." "Refugees?" "Yes, in some ways the place reminds me of the Third World. It's like a very upmarket favela in Rio, or a luxury bidonville outside Algiers. It's the Fourth World, Charles. The one waiting to take over everything." We returned to the Porsche and cruised around the plaza. I watched the villas and apartment houses, hoping for the sound of a raised human voice, a too loud stereo system, the recoil of a diving board, and realized that we were witnessing an intense inward migration. The residents of the Costa Sol complex, like those of the retirement pueblos along the coast, had retreated to their shaded lounges, their bunkers with a view, needing only that part of the external world that was distilled from the sky by their satellite dishes. Standing empty in the sun, the sports club and social center, like the other amenities engineered into the complex by its Swiss consultants, resembled the props of an abandoned film production. "Crawford, it's time to leave. Let's get back to Estrella de Mar. You've seen enough? I want to hear that tennis machine of yours and the laughter of tipsy women. I want to hear Mrs. Shan telling off the waiters at the Club Nautico. If she invests here, she'll lose everything." "Maybe, before we go, we'll look in at the sports club. It's semi-derelict, but it has possibilities." We passed the marina and turned into the forecourt of the sports club. A single car was parked by the entrance, but no one seemed to be present in the empty building. We stepped from the Porsche and strolled around the drained swimming pool, looking down at the canted floor that exposed its dusty tiles to the sun. A collection of hair clips and wine glasses lay around the drainage vent, as if waiting for a stream to flow. Crawford sat back in a chair by the open-air bar, watching me while I tested the spring of the diving board. Handsome and affable, he gazed at me in a generous but canny way, like a junior officer selecting a raw recruit for a sensitive mission. "So, Charles," he said when I joined him at the bar, "I'm glad you came on the tour. You've just seen the promotional video presented to all new owners at the Residencia Costa Sol. Compelling stuff?" "Absolutely. It's very, very strange. Even so, most visitors driving around wouldn't notice anything odd. Apart from this pool and those empty shops, it's extremely well maintained. There's excellent security and not a trace of graffiti anywhere. Most people's idea of paradise today. What happened?" "Nothing happened." Crawford sat forward, speaking quietly, as if not wanting to unsettle the silence. 2,500 people moved in, mostly well off and with all the time in the world to do the things they dreamed about in London and Manchester and Edinburgh. Time for bridge and tennis, for cordon bleu and flower arrangement classes. Time for having little affairs and for messing about in boats, learning Spanish and playing the Tokyo stock market. They sell up and buy their dream house, move everything down to the Costa del Sol, and then what happens? The dream switches itself off. Why? They're too old? Or too lazy to bother? Doing nothing may secretly be just what they wanted, but that isn't what they wanted. Plot for plot, villa for villa, the Residencia Costa Sol is far more expensive than similar developments in Calahonda and Los Monteros. They paid a fat extra premium to have all these sports facilities and leisure clubs. Anyway, the people here are not that old. This isn't a geriatric ward. Most of them are the right side of 50. They took early retirement, cashed in their share options or sold their partnerships, made the most of a golden handshake. The Costa Sol complex isn't Sunset City, Arizona. I've been there. Actually, it's a lively spot. Those 70-year-olds can get pretty frisky. Frisky. Wearily, Crawford pressed his palms against his forehead. He stared at the silent villas around the plaza, their shaded balconies, waiting for nothing to happen. I was tempted to make another flippant remark, but I could see that he felt an almost impatient concern for the people of the Residencia. He reminded me of a young district commissioner in the days of empire, faced with a rich but torpid tribe that inexplicably refused to leave its huts. The bandage on his arm had leaked a little blood onto his shirt sleeve, but he was clearly uninterested in himself, driven by a zeal that seemed so out of place in this land of jacuzzis and plunge pools. Crawford, trying to reassure him, I said, "Does it matter? If they want to doze their lives away with the sound turned down, let them." "No." Crawford paused and then reached forward to grip my hand. "It does matter, Charles. This is the way the world is going. You've seen the future and it doesn't work or play. The Costa souls of this planet are spreading outwards. I've toured them in Florida and New Mexico. You should visit the Fontainebleau Sud complex outside Paris. It's a replica of this, 10 times the size. The Residencia Costa Sol wasn't thrown together by some gimcrack developer. It was carefully planned to give people the chance of a better life. And what have they got? Brain death." "Not brain death, Bobby. That's Paula speak. The Costa del Sol is the longest afternoon in the world, and they've decided to sleep through it." "You're right," Crawford spoke softly as if accepting my point. He took off his aviator glasses and stared at the harsh light reflected from the pool tiles. "But I intend to wake them up. That's my job, Charles. Why I was picked, I don't know. But I stumbled on a way of saving people and bringing them back to life. I tried it at Estrella de Mar and it worked. Perhaps, I'm not sure about that, but it won't work here. Estrella de Mar is a real place. It existed before you and Betty Shand arrived. The Residencia Costa Sol is real. Too real," Crawford doggedly recited his uncertain credo, rehearsing an argument that I guessed he had run through many times, an amalgam of alarmist bestsellers, economist think pieces, and his own obsessive intuitions that he had put together on the windswept balcony of his apartment. "Townscapes are changing. The open plan city belongs to the past. No more Ramblas, no more pedestrian precincts, no more left banks and Latin quarters. We're moving into the age of security grills and defensible space. As for living, our surveillance cameras can do that for us. People are locking their doors and switching off their nervous systems. I can free them, Charles. With your help, we can make a start here in the Residencia Costa Sol. Bobby," I met his engaging sea blue eyes fixed on me with their curious mix of threat and hope. "There's nothing I can do. I came here to help Frank. I know, and you have helped him, but now help me, Charles. I need someone to hold the fort for me. Keep an eye on the ground and warn me if I'm going too far. The role Frank played at the Club Nautico. Look, Bobby, you can." Crawford held my wrists and drew me towards him across the table. Behind his pleading was a strange missionary fervor that seemed to float across his mind, like the malarial visions of that young district officer he so resembled, reaching out for the aid of a passing traveler. "We may fail, but it's worth trying. The Residencia Costa Sol is a prison just as much as Zarzula Jail. We're building prisons all over the world and calling them luxury condos. The amazing thing is that the keys are all on the inside. I can help people to snap the locks and step out into real air again. Think, Charles. If it works, you can write a book about it. A warning to the rest of the world. The kind of warning that no one is keen to hear. What do you want me to do? Keep an eye on this club. Betty Shand has bought out the lease. We reopen in 3 weeks' time. We need someone to run the place for us. I'm the wrong man. You need a trained manager. I can't hire and fire staff, keep accounts, and run a restaurant. You'll soon learn." Confident that he had recruited me, Crawford gestured dismissively at the bar. "Besides, there's no restaurant, and Betty will do the hiring and firing. Don't worry about the accounts. David Hennessy has all that under control. Join us, Charles. Once we get the tennis club going, everything else will follow. The Residencia Costa Sol will come alive again. After a few games of tennis? You could stage Wimbledon here and no one would notice. They will, Charles. Of course, there'll be more than tennis. When they set up the Costa Sol complex, there was one ingredient missing. Work? Not work, Charles, no. I waited as he gazed at the silent villas around the plaza and the cameras on the lamp standards that tracked the cars leaving the shopping mall. His open and eager face was touched by a determination that Frank must have found equally intriguing. The modest sports club with its shabby courts and drained pool was a far cry from the Club Nautico, but by pretending to manage it, I would draw closer to Crawford and Betty Shand, and might at last step onto the path that had led to the burning of the Hollinger mansion and Frank's absurd confession. A yacht had entered the marina, a white-hulled sloop with furled sails moving under its engine. Gunnar Anderson stood at the helm, his slim-shouldered figure as tall as a mizzen-mast, shirt floating from his shoulders like a strip of tattered sail. The craft seemed neglected, its hull smeared with oil, and I assumed that Anderson had sailed it through the tanker lanes from Tangier. Then I noticed the tag of yellow ribbon flying from the fore rail, the last of the police tapes that had wrapped themselves around the craft. It's the Halcyon, Frank's sloop. What's it doing here? That's right. Crawford stood up and waved to Anderson, who doffed his cap in return. I talked to Dan Villa. Frank agrees the yacht will be safer in the Costa Sol Marina. No tourists cutting off bits of rigging. Gunnar is going to work in the boatyard and start servicing all these arthritic engines. With a little luck, we'll make the Costa Sol Regatta the swankiest show on the coast. Believe me, Charles, sea air is what people need. Now here's Elizabeth, looking more handsome every day. Bratwurst obviously agrees with her. The stretch Mercedes was turning into the car park of the sports club. Betty Shand lay back against the leather upholstery, a wide-brimmed hat screening her veiled face, a gloved hand jerking the passenger strap as if reminding the huge car of its rightful owner. The swarthy Maghrebian sat at the wheel, the two young Germans on the jump seats behind him. When the car stopped by the steps, Mahood sounded the horn. And a moment later, David Hennessy and the Keswick sisters emerged from the Thai restaurant. Together they set off towards the club, bundles of property prospectuses under their arms. A team was assembling in the central plaza of the Residencia Costa Sol. Crawford, Elizabeth Shand, Hennessy, and the Keswick sisters were coming together, ready to discuss their plans for the complex and its residents. The manager of the Thai restaurant waved to his departing guests, little realizing that his menus would soon be changing. Betty Shand and the Keswicks, I commented. The seafood's going to be good. Charles? Yes, the Keswick girls are taking over the Thai place. They know what people need, always a big help. Now, have you thought about working for us? All right, I said, I'll stay until Frank's trial, but nothing too arduous. Of course not. Crawford leaned across the table and clasped my shoulders, smiling with unfeigned delight, and I sensed that for a few seconds I had become the most important person in his world. The one friend he had relied upon to come to his aid. As he beamed at me proudly, his face seemed almost adolescent, blonde hair spilling over his forehead, lips parted across immaculate white teeth. Squeezing me with his strong hands, he spoke in a rush of light-headed words. I knew you would, Charles. You're the one person I need here. You've seen the world. You understand how much we have to do if we're going to help these people. By the way, a house comes with the job. I'll find you one with a tennis court, and we'll play a few games. I know you're a lot better than you let on. You'll soon see. By the way, you can pay me a small salary. Living expenses, car hire, and so on, since I'm not earning a cent anymore. Absolutely. He sat back and gazed at me fondly as Elizabeth Shand made her imperial way into the club. David Hennessy's already written out your first check. Believe me, Charles, we've thought of everything.